Hi, everyone. Dr. Liz here. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast. I'm glad you're here, glad you're listening and learning, and hopefully it will help you with your journey along the way. I am a psychotherapist with a specialty in anxiety, insomnia, and deeper emotional healing. Hypnosis is one of the tools in my toolbox that I use to help people feel better and to help people be better. I do work all over the world. Please feel free to reach out and contact me if you would like some help. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my adult life, built an award-winning company, sold it, and then focused mainly on my private practice. That gives you a unique perspective, especially my ability to work with people in business at all kinds of levels. Before I go, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can go and subscribe to the newsletter. And you'll get free hypnosis downloads that you can listen to immediately. Another way is to buy one of the downloads that I have for sale. I only have a couple up there, but they're good ones. They've stood the test of time. I made the decision to not run ads during my podcast because I really do see it as an act of service. I completely respect people who do have ads on their podcast, but it's just not my path. All right, everyone, enjoy the episode. And I hope to see you back here soon. Hey everyone, Dr. Liz here. Today we're talking about a book called A Path Through the Jungle, a psychological health and well-being program to develop robustness and resilience. It's by Dr. Steve Peters, Professor Steve Peters, Peters. This is a life-changing book, and I actually sought permission from him to talk extensively about this book because at one point I thought I would do a series on it, like 10 episodes, okay? 5 episodes, a whole new podcast. I don't know. It really is probably one of the books that's changed my life the most and how I think about anxiety, depression, plans. And that's saying a lot to say that in my 50s when I've studied psychology, change methods, have read hundreds of books in my life, taken professional workshops, all kinds of stuff for the last, more than 30 years because I started studying psychology actually in high school. I took a high school special program to study psychology 2 hours a day. And then got a bachelor's in psychology, then a master's, PhD in clinical psychology. So again, most of my life I have been studying psychology. So it's quite a statement to say this is a life-changing book, just to let you know that. It was recommended to me by a client actually, and I bought a paper copy of it. There's a Kindle copy, but I highly suggest the paperback because it's not your typical self-help book. It is laid out almost like, it's not a boring textbook. It's an exciting textbook, okay? Pictures, graphics, little inlays. It's amazing, really. So visually, it kept me very interested. Now, I will say I took my time reading it. Normally, a book of this size, 300-something pages, I could get through. I mean, if it's literature or fiction, I finish it in 2 or 3 days. If it's nonfiction, maybe a week or two, maybe a month. This one took me months to get through because I wanted to absorb the information really well. I'd go back and reread it. I would do some of the exercises that he suggested in it. And I really wanted to get a good handle on the material. So I read it very slowly, actually. Now I'm reading other books during that time as well, not just this one, but I purposely slowed down for this one so that I could learn the concepts really well. So we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to talk also about some of the basic concepts in it that he presents. Dr. Peters. This is one of the times that I wish the podcast was visual. A lot of people record record their podcasts and put it on YouTube and all of that. I don't tend to do that because honestly, that takes a much higher effort in terms of makeup, cameras, lighting, all that stuff. I have always been an audio-based podcast, but I will try my best to describe the handouts to you so that you get a visual picture of them as we go. Here we go. He starts with the basic concept of your chimp versus your human. The chimp is that feeling part of ourselves that doesn't really think. And what the chimp does is its job is to detect a problem and then signal to us that there is a problem, okay? And usually that is through negative emotions. Now, negative emotions are not there to be endured, despite what the Buddhists say, okay? We all have negative emotions, actually. We all have pain and suffering, but they're not there to just simply be endured. They're actually there to prompt us to act in various ways. And really what they need is converting into constructive action. So often what they prompt us to do is not very constructive, okay? Act out, do things that are not good for ourselves, overeat, drink, addictions, gambling, that type of thing, create drama, create conflict in our relationships, sometimes do things that aren't so safe for us, like get in our car and drive really fast, or tune our loved ones out, ignore good advice or people trying to help us. There's all kinds of ways that it's not constructive action when the negative emotions are there. But ultimately, what the chimp is trying to tell us is that, hey, there's a problem. There's a problem. There's a problem. You need to handle this. But the chimp is emotional, is reactive, is defensive. It can't plan. It's impulsive. But it is trying to protect us and help us. It's like a bad friend, I say, that is trying to be a friend to us, try to tell us something, be connected to us, but isn't giving us very good advice. Sort of like the friend who says, don't worry about, your health. Go ahead and eat the chocolate cake. It's okay. All right. So there's the chimp. The chimp thrives on drives too. We all have basic human drives. An example of some drives are the drive for power, sex, partnership. The drive for security is very, very high in us humans. Security in terms of food and shelter. People do all kinds of things to get it. Territory is a basic drive. Troop, herd, a sense of belonging is a big drive for a lot of people. Again, people vary on how strong these drives are in them. Another one is dominance, which is ego drive. That's an ego-driven drive. Sometimes it's parental, a nurturing drive comes up. Often it's mental stimulation, inquisitiveness. That's a basic human drive, to be curious about what's around us and how to understand what's around us. Now, why do we all have these drives? To keep us safe. That's it. To keep the species going. That's it. To keep us all surviving and hopefully to keep us safe again. So remember that the chimp thrives on drives. And when a drive is being threatened, it will send us some negative emotions, detect a problem, and signal us with the negative emotions. I had a neighbor in South Florida who had a very strong territory drive. So I lived in a townhouse and there were 2 parking spaces in front of mine and 2 parking spaces in front of hers. And when I first moved in, her mom was still driving, but her mom aged and then they only had 1 car. But she would park her car sort of like kitty cornered, crooked, so that she took up both of those parking spaces. And even if she didn't do that, if let's say a repair person came to my house and happened to park in her space, because it's right there in front of my house too, she would go ballistic. Okay. And she said I had to ask permission and, that's disrespectful and, all this stuff. So I learned pretty quickly. She had an extremely high territory drive. And as long as I realized that and asked permission, she was fine. But boy, if it ever got violated, even by accident, I didn't tell people to park there. They just show up and park wherever, right? And they'll park as closest to your house as they can get, regardless of whether it's marked a guest spot or not. But even if it was by accident, it was, she blamed me, right? It was my fault. So once you know someone's drives, you can choose how to address them. Now, luckily, I don't like a whole lot of conflict, so I didn't do stuff on purpose to piss her off, basically. I could see how you hear stories about neighbors getting into wars like that, and that's because of things like that maybe they're not conflict averse, or they really don't care about the other person, or they're drive for power is higher than their drive for security, because honestly, a more friendly relationship with your neighbor, it gives you a bigger sense of security. You don't have to be scared of them. They're going to do something to your property. So all of these drives come into play different ways. That's just an example of one of them. So the chimp thrives on drives. We all have drives. The chimp sends us a message until we pay attention. That's it. The chimp sends messages until we pay attention. So it'll continue to make things uncomfortable for us until we pay attention. We have a human part. The job of the human part is to find a solution and reassure the chimp. Okay? The human part is thoughtful, rational, able to pause, problem solve. It's time focused. It makes decisions. It makes plans. It is trying to protect us, just like the chimp is, and help us. But it's more like a helpful friend who says, your health is really important, but that chocolate cake is no big deal. Let's go take a walk after dinner. Okay, that's the human side. Now, remember, I didn't name these. This is Peter's who named them, but I just think that they are laid out clearly, and it just intuitively makes sense to me like this. Now, the other thing that informs our human is our programming. He calls it what's in your computer. I would say what's in your subconscious mind. Sometimes what's in your conscious mind too, because our programming gives information to our human. The chimp gives information to our human. So imagine this little triangle going on, and both arrows are pointing to the human, trying to give it information so that it can find a solution and then reassure the chimp. Now, we have different types of programming or subconscious beliefs. The first type is helpful autopilots. And these are things that are like they sound, autopilots. They're automatic in us. And they pop up when we need some help. A helpful autopilot is like, I can only do my best. I can make a plan and start small. I have a choice about who I want to be and how I am in the world, how I want to interact. Something may happen unexpectedly, and a helpful autopilot could pop up and say, oh, I can handle whatever happens. I can sort it out. I'm capable of going with the flow would be a helpful autopilot. When necessary, I make plans. I generally stick to them, but I'm able to adjust if they need adjusting, would be a helpful autopilot. So it's things like this. And people have their own individual ones. I have heard lots and lots of good, helpful autopilots over my years presenting this information. Also just listening. When you listen to someone talk, when you really listen deeply, you will hear helpful autopilots pop up. Helpful autopilot is the serenity prayer. Higher power, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. That's a helpful autopilot. I mean, you can imagine someone in recovery saying that, let's say every day for 90 days at the beginning of the recovery, but for years and years and years, it's repeated so much, it's applied to different situations, becomes a helpful autopilot. Some prayers become helpful autopilot. So Prayers that are set in different religious faiths become helpful autopilots. There's the prayer of St. Francis, which, if you're familiar with Sarah McLachlan, she did a beautiful musical version of that prayer. This can become a helpful autopilot. It was one for me when I was going through a really difficult time at one point, right before I entered recovery myself. And it says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. And then there's a second one I'm going to read to you. So if you don't want to hear it, you can, hit that fast forward button of your podcast. Oh, divine master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Now, I don't believe in the patriarchal God. Let's say I have my own, what I call a freaky deaky higher power. But this was a great comfort to me. It helped guide my behavior at a time when I felt very out of control. But that is what I would call a helpful autopilot that I drew strength from. Okay, so helpful autopilot, same former human. When the chimp's sending a message and freaking out and saying, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? There's a problem. What else informs our human? Next level is unhelpful gremlins. Unhelpful or destructive automatic behaviors or beliefs. But they are more changeable than the third level, which is goblins. These are the same as gremlins, but they're more resistant to being removed. And goblins often stem from childhood or traumatic experiences like I'm not safe, I'm never safe. I'm worthless. That's an unhelpful goblin. I don't deserve a good life or to be loved by a good person. I fail at whatever I try to do. I'm not as good as everybody else. Those are the level of a goblin. Gremlin would be mistakes are not okay, but I make them sometimes. I have to win. It's best to win. I feel bad if I don't. But you don't go to the level of saying I'm a loser if I don't win. The helpful autopilot there would be I tried my best, and you don't always win, even when you try your best. It's all too much. I'm unable to cope. That would be unhelpful gremlins. If you take it to the level of I'm unable to cope and unable to reach out for help, no one's ever going to help me or want to help me because I'm worthless. Then you're entering the territory of the goblin. Okay. So gremlins and goblins, right? Worse to be a goblin than a gremlin. Now, his book is about changing these unhelpful gremlins and goblins, recognizing them first, of course, then changing them and changing them in various ways. Now, I'm a hypnosis specialist, so here comes hypnosis for you. Personally and professionally, I believe that hypnosis is a way to change those unhelpful goblins and gremlins. Sometimes these core beliefs get established in childhood. Sometimes it's adolescence. Sometimes if it's due to trauma, it's in adulthood even. And then our subconscious mind just latches onto them and gathers evidence for them and lives our life as if they're true instead of really combating them. And sometimes this has to do with parenting, but sometimes it's teachers, siblings, something random that happens, friends that can instill these really negative, deep beliefs in us. And the power of hypnosis to heal and change that is just incredible, is what I've seen over the years after I became trained in the technique to do exactly that. And you've heard me talk about it on the podcast before. It's called core healing because we're healing core beliefs. We're healing these unhelpful goblins that make us do stuff we don't want to do or sabotage us or make us feel bad about ourselves. These are all goblins that come up and do that. Now, the task here is to replace the unhelpful gremlins and goblins, the negative beliefs, with helpful autopilots. to install that when negative emotion comes up, it is a catalyst for change. It's just a signal for us to do something. It's neither positive or negative, actually, okay? But it's just simply a signal for us. It's a flag. Hey, something's going on. You need to handle it. You need to take a look at it. You need to change something here, or something needs to change. Sometimes we're not always in the power position to change something that's causing us distress, but we can absolutely change what we're doing with that distress. You've heard me say this before. I do not think that it is all about thought change. I know that is odd coming from a cognitive behavioral therapist. Most CBT therapists, a lot of coaches these days think it's all about thoughts. Thoughts, 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 thoughts. I don't believe that. I think that people, events, outside forces affect us, some of us more deeply than others, and that depends on your own sensitivity level. And we don't always control that. Like, yes, we are affected by the world we live in. But where I do agree with them is, all right, let's recognize that. Let's recognize what we can control, what we can change, and what we can handle, and work on releasing the pain and suffering around things that we can't. That would be a helpful autopilot. I can't change everything, but I can work on releasing the suffering so that I am able to move forward in my life to live with a greater sense of ease. All right, so how do we do this? We say, what's the emotion feeling being expressed? Why did the chimp send this message? What constructive action do we convert the feeling into? Or what belief do I have to challenge and replace? Now, if we choose a constructive action, we need to celebrate. We've completed the action because chimps like bananas is what Peter says, and I do too. Most of us humans react very well to reward, even if it's very small. There's all kinds of ways to celebrate. And I always say look for creative ways that don't cost money to celebrate. Sometimes it's like, all right, taking a walk. For me, it's often, okay, I'll do this task and then I'll get to exercise. It's a wonderful way to celebrate for me. Having a cup of tea, taking a drive somewhere you want to go, calling a friend. Sometimes it is larger if we're doing really major stuff. We have a bigger celebration. We naturally do this in our lives. When someone graduates high school or college, or in the US, 8th grade or kindergarten, or 5th grade too, we have a celebration. We have a graduation for them. Even my daughter even had a preschool graduation, which was super cute. Let me tell you, so cute. I definitely miss those days. I was a parent who cried during all of those because the kids are so cute. So we naturally do this. So when you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I chose a constructive action instead of a destructive action, wonderful. How am I going to celebrate? Now, if you're challenging a belief, the task there is to choose a simple truth that resonates with you and helps. Now, this is harder than it sounds. I learned pretty early on through my hypnosis training that the reason that affirmations don't always work, because when we're going along here and you're thinking, is that just an affirmation, that helpful autopilot? No, it's not. It's really not. Because affirmations don't work if you really don't believe them. Your subconscious mind will come in and be like, you don't really believe that. We're not doing that. That's never going to happen. Okay. But this is sometimes why people get disappointed by manifesting, but they're like, but I've been manifesting. I've been writing it down and all this stuff. And it's like, do you really believe that this is possible for you? Because if you don't, that's what's happening. We've got to take some baby steps here and get there step by step. We've got to do something you believe that is possible for you to get to this other result. So let me give you some examples of this. Simple belief. Life is not fair. That's a simple belief that can resonate with you. If you're challenging a belief, a gremlin could come up of, oh my God, I never get what's owed to me. It's like, yeah, life is not fair. And I sometimes don't get what's owed to me. Can I think of even one instance of getting something that really was owed to me? that's a yes, then we're eliminating the never. Okay, I never get anything that's owed to me. But still, life is often not fair. So we make it something that's reasonable. Most things work out in the end, and if it doesn't, I'll figure it out. Will this matter tomorrow? That's challenging a belief. If you have trouble thinking of these, I often say to think about your own values, your own top values. So one of my top values for parenting when my kids are smaller is I wanted them to trust me and feel like I am reliable, like mommy always shows up. And so I was having a problem leaving work on time. I'd get involved in writing notes or doing some marketing or something, and it would be like, I gotta go pick up the kids from school. Oh my God, I'm gonna be late. And so I thought, no, I don't want to be late. I want them to really believe that I will be there on time and I am reliable. And so I set my alarm differently. The alarm wasn't go pick up the kids. The alarm became create trust in my children, be reliable for my children. That's what the alarm becomes, is taps into your values when you're challenging a belief. There was a point of time in my life where I really believed I was going to die early at like 53. So when I passed the 53 birthday, it was a huge celebration, believe me, because I had worked on this my whole life pretty much, but there was still some lingering little like, maybe I will make it past 53. But I had a father die at 53. His dad had died at 53. And so I got it set into my mind at 18 when my father died that I'm going to die at 53. Okay, that's what I mean by significant events that can form these beliefs. So I had this negative belief going on, and it prevented me from doing all kinds of things. There's been times in my life when I've thought about changing careers or buying a huge purchase, like let's say a new car or something like that. And I would think to myself, well, what's the point of that? Like I can hang in here. I'm only going to be alive another 10 years or something. So it really truly formed my life like that. Like maybe I shouldn't look for a new partner after my divorce. I'm not going to be around. Well, finally, at one point, I saw the psychic. Okay, and I would say I've only seen two psychics in my whole life, so I'm not someone who goes to psychics a lot. But somehow I ended up with her. And she looked at me and she said, wow, like it's all over you, all over your aura that you really believe this. But newsflash, you're not going to die at 53. And I cried. I was like, what? I mean, I was not relief. I was like, oh my God, this is awful news. Like, this means I have to take responsibility for my life now. I have to live it in a different way. It was a high change event in my life. And she said to me, I want you to start to notice people who are older in their, 70s, 80s who have their mind about them. Because part of my fear was like, oh, I'll get Alzheimer's like my mother did. And, I don't want to grow old and be out of my mind and have dementia. She said, that's not going to happen either. And so you're going to start looking for examples of older people who are sharp as a tack, live their life to the fullest, keep doing things that they love to do, whether they're working or not working. And in doing that action, it began to change my own belief about aging, my own responsibility in life. So that's one way to do it, right? Now, the book, A Path Through the Jungle, I don't think he recommends psychics in his book. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. He recommends more changing this on the cognitive level. But we're choosing beliefs that we can hold on to. So let's take that same example from me. A belief would be, well, I might die at 53, but I might as well live my life well until then. That would be a belief I could hold on to, let's say that's in between, versus like, you're not going to die. I'm not going to die. I just, again, didn't completely believe that until after my 53rd birthday. Over time, I've developed a whole list of believable beliefs, autopilot support statements that people can choose from, but they've got to choose one that is helpful, that is believable to them, that resonates with them even. So sometimes when we're working on anxiety, they'll look down this list and choose a support statement to say to themselves when anxiety arises. One of them is, it's okay to make mistakes. I can handle being wrong. And one time someone read this one and then she said, oh, I don't believe that at all. We're not going to pick that one. Okay. I found it so amusing. So we kept moving on down the list. There's like 20 or something until we found one that did resonate. If you wanted to transform that one, it might be, it's not okay to make mistakes, but they happen anyway sometimes. I am human and they may happen anyway. That would be a compassionate one. So we're not challenging that part that says it's not okay to make mistakes. No, we're working with it. It's still not okay, but it still happens. And so when it happens, I can remind myself that I'm human. And I can hope that nothing awful happens from one of my mistakes. You could see how these come. If you have any experience with anxiety or OCD, particularly the thought-based ones, and I work with those, you can really get yourself into a conundrum here around support statements. Part of the treatment for OCD in particular is actually not challenging those statements that people don't believe directly. It's coming at them sideways, and that's what we're doing here too. Let's say I may not wash my hands as many times as I need to, and maybe I get a really bad disease and end up in the hospital. Okay, we could keep going with this one, but we're just going to stop right there. But I don't want OCD to control my life. I want to feel a sense of freedom. I want time back in my life to do other things. So I'm going to take the risk that I may get sick if I don't continue to wash my hands. Now that's believable. I can take the risk as believable to people. And that's hard to tolerate sometimes. So we talk about distress tolerance. How do we tolerate it? What do we say to ourselves to tolerate it? What do we do? Sometimes we have to get really active to tolerate it and to take our minds off of it. People often think about like the quiet activities, journaling, meditating, breathing. Those don't always work. Okay, sometimes you have to get really active, working out, doing squats, taking a run, going for a drive, calling a friend and talking it out. Those are more active. And sometimes those are necessary depending on the energy of what's going on. Now, sometimes a support statement can be practical, and other times it could be more spiritual. One of the spiritual items on my list is my bad times are just lessons that my soul chose to have in this physical experience. I always find ways to survive even the most difficult circumstances. That's a spiritual statement. It can be a great comfort and a helpful autopilot for someone who really needs it in that moment. Okay, if you want something to do at this end of this podcast, this week, today, tomorrow, identify an unhelpful gremlin when it pops up and identify a helpful autopilot as well. Once you start doing that, you'll see them all over the place in yourself and other people when they talk. You'll start to notice them. And when the unhelpful gremlin pops up or an unhelpful goblin pops up, then see if you can find a helpful autopilot that replaces it. Again, this isn't easy. This is why people like me exist, because it's not easy. We all get stuck in our own thought patterns sometimes, and we can't think of an alternate. I see this all the time. People freeze in front of me. They really can't think of an alternate. It's like, okay, well, I have some prepared for just this situation. Let's see if any of these fit for you. Let's see if any of these are believable enough for you to remind yourself when the unhelpful gremlin or goblin pops up. Or always a possibility. Let's see if we can heal these with hypnosis. We'll go back to the time period that created them and do some healing around them. All right, people. Next week, I'll talk about anxiety in terms of the chimp model. So I alluded to it some today, but I didn't really cover the whole thing in terms of how he covers it in A Path Through the Jungle. So keep your ear out for that episode. Okay, I hope you're healthy and safe. Peace.
I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis, so if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website, and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace.
This podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need therapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional.